A 42-year-old fisherman named Ray Walker had spent nearly his entire life on the water off the coast of Oregon. He knew every inlet, every curve of the shoreline, and every change in the tides like the back of his hand. It was a quiet, reliable routine, until one particular morning when something out of the ordinary caught his attention. As he cast his nets far from shore, a strange object surfaced, bobbing gently on the waves. It wasn't anything he'd ever seen before. At first, he thought it was just some old, discarded debris, but as it drifted closer, the sun caught a glint off the water, a metallic reflection that sent a chill down his spine. Ray leaned over the edge of his boat, squinting. A mask, worn and weathered by time, floated there, almost beckoning him to retrieve it. And so, without thinking, he reached down. But the moment his fingers touched the surface of the mask, a shiver ran through him, unlike anything he had ever felt before. When he finally managed to pull it onto the deck, something terrifying became clear. Whatever this mask was, it wasn't just some lost relic, and the deeper Ray looked into its design, the more he realized it wasn't meant to be found. Would you dare to pick it up? Hit subscribe to uncover the full story. Stay tuned, there's more to come. Ray Walker had lived his entire life by the water, surrounded by its vastness, its mystery. From the moment he set foot on a boat as a boy, he understood its ways, its rhythms. He was part of its quiet, constant ebb and flow. For over 20 years he had gone out every day, casting his nets, catching fish, and letting the sea speak to him in its own peculiar language. There was a calm in the water that he had come to trust, an assurance that the ocean would always give back what it took. But that day felt different. The morning began like any other. Ray had woken up before the crack of dawn, as usual, feeling the familiar ache in his muscles from years of hard labor. He grabbed his coffee, pulled on his weathered jacket, and boarded his boat, a small but sturdy vessel he'd named Sea Whisperer. The fog was heavy as always that time of year, settling over the coastline like a thick, damp blanket, but the sea was calm, the weather quiet, and he felt the familiar sense of peace as he cast his nets into the water. The waves, though slow and gentle, held something strange this morning, something Ray couldn't quite put his finger on. He kept his gaze fixed on the horizon, his hands expertly maneuvering the boat through the water. But it wasn't long before he noticed something odd floating in the distance. At first, it looked like nothing more than a small cluster of debris, maybe a piece of driftwood or a forgotten bundle of plastic. But as the boat drifted closer, Ray realized that what he was looking at was no ordinary piece of junk. His curiosity, honed over the years of living with the sea, flared up. He squinted through the fog, trying to make out the object. It was about a foot across, bobbing gently, almost like it was waiting for him to come closer. It was too smooth, too deliberate to be a simple waste product. And then he saw the glint of metal. Damn, he muttered to himself. His instincts told him it was something worth investigating, something worth pulling in. He steered the boat toward it, his heart beginning to beat a little faster. As the object neared, he could see it clearly now. A mask. It wasn't large, but it was clearly old, worn down by years of exposure to the elements. The face was blank, expressionless, but somehow it seemed to stare back at him. Ray's hand instinctively reached for it, the pull of curiosity almost impossible to resist. He stopped the engine, leaning over the side of the boat to get a better look. The mask was made of a dark, aged material, perhaps ceramic or some sort of hard resin, and the surface was slick with salt water. It had an eerie air about it, something ancient. Ray's fingers brushed against its surface, and that was when he felt the first strange sensation. It wasn't the cold of the water or the smoothness of the mask. It was a prickling sense of unease that settled in his stomach, gnawing at him, as though something unseen had brushed against his skin. He yanked the mask aboard, not thinking, but his hands trembled slightly as he gripped it. The thing was heavier than it looked, and as he studied it, the more it unnerved him. Its surface was cracked in places, like it had been through years of harsh treatment. But the most unsettling part was its design. It wasn't anything like the masks he had seen in his years, nothing ceremonial, nothing from any culture he recognized. The eye holes were strangely elongated, almost as if they had been distorted over time. The nose and mouth were so smooth that they seemed unnatural, more like a reflection of the human face than the real thing. Ray shook off the discomfort, trying to focus on the practical side of things. What was this? How had it ended up here, drifting on the water? Maybe it had been dumped by some careless traveler, or was part of a wreck from years ago. But even as the rational thoughts tried to take over, the weight of the mask in his hands felt wrong. A strange unease bloomed in his chest. He turned the mask over, inspecting it further, when something glinted beneath the surface of its cracked exterior. A symbol, small, almost imperceptible at first, but then more distinct as he looked closer. It was intricate, a swirling pattern of lines, almost like a design from an ancient civilization, something that didn't belong to the modern world. Ray's heart skipped a beat. The symbol reminded him of something he couldn't quite place, something he had heard about in passing years ago, but he was still too unsettled to dwell on it. The mask was unsettling enough, and he needed to get back to shore. He stuffed the mask into a canvas bag he kept on the boat, and his eyes swept over the water once more. Everything seemed the same, the waves the same, the fog still creeping in from the coast. Yet something felt different, as though the sea itself had shifted in some subtle, imperceptible way. "All right, enough of this," Ray muttered, starting up the engine once again. He turned the boat back toward the shore, determined to put whatever had happened behind him. But as he neared the coast, the unease he felt lingered, gnawing at him. It wasn't until later that evening, when Ray was back at his small house on the outskirts of town, that the unease grew into something more. He sat in his kitchen, the mask in front of him on the table. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he examined it once more. The faint light of the setting sun caught the symbol, and for a brief moment, Ray swore he saw something flicker in the symbol's design. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. But the vision had passed, yet it left him with a growing sense of dread. He wasn't the superstitious type. He didn't believe in ghosts or curses, and the sea, while mysterious, had never been anything but a source of livelihood to him. But something about this mask was off. He wasn't the kind of man to feel a deep sense of foreboding without reason, but this was different. After a few more minutes of staring at it, Ray stood up, his gut telling him that maybe he should take it somewhere. Maybe someone in town, someone who knew more about this kind of thing, could help him make sense of it. His mind flickered to his friend Tom, a local historian with an odd interest in ancient artifacts. Maybe Tom would have an answer. He needed to find out where it came from. Ray grabbed the mask and stuffed it into his bag, then headed out of the house intent on finding Tom. But as he walked down the darkened street, the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore seemed to echo in his ears. It was strange how the noise seemed louder tonight, more oppressive, almost as if the ocean were calling to him, urging him to return to it. He shook the thought away, telling himself it was just his nerves getting the better of him. But as he approached Tom's house, his steps slowed. There was something in the air tonight, something thick with the salt of the sea and the weight of the unknown. Tom wasn't home. His truck was parked outside, but the house was dark. Ray knocked a few times, but there was no answer. His instinct screamed at him to leave, but his curiosity, and the nagging sensation that he had to find answers, kept him standing there. It was then that he saw something that froze him in place. On the front door of Tom's house was a symbol, scratched into the wood. It was the same intricate design he had seen on the mask. Ray's heart pounded in his chest. The weight of the mask in his bag seemed to grow heavier, as though something was pulling at him, urging him to leave. He turned and ran back toward his house, the eerie feeling crawling up his spine. That night, Ray couldn't sleep. The sound of waves crashing against the shore kept him awake, whispering to him, calling to him in a way that made his skin crawl. The mask sat on his table, waiting. And as he stared at it, something deep within him knew. This wasn't just some artifact. It was something far more dangerous, something that had been waiting to be found. Ray didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table, his hands pressed to his temples, staring at the mask, which seemed to grow darker and more unsettling the longer he looked at it. The waves crashing against the shore outside were louder than usual, and every gust of wind made the house creak like it was trying to tell him something. The unease gnawed at his stomach, and his thoughts swirled in a whirlwind of confusion and fear. What was it about this mask? Why had it ended up on his boat? Hours passed before Ray finally managed to pull himself together. The morning light came too quickly, and he was already up and out of the house by dawn, driving back to the shore, unable to shake the feeling that whatever was happening, it wasn't over. He needed answers. The mask had to be connected to something, someone, somewhere. He couldn't be the only one who had seen it. He had to show it to someone, anyone, who might have a clue. He decided to make the long drive to the nearby town of Port Haven, hoping someone there could give him more information. Port Haven wasn't a large town, only a few thousand people lived there, but it had its share of oddballs. There were a few locals who were always interested in strange finds, collectors and historians alike. Perhaps one of them might know something. Ray's mind raced as he drove along the winding coastal highway, the fog slowly lifting in patches as the sun rose higher. The further he drove, the more his stomach churned. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in on him, something far worse than he could have imagined. He reached Port Haven a little after noon and parked in front of the small, cluttered building that belonged to an antiquities expert named Harold Smith. Harold had been in the business for years, dealing in relics, trinkets, and anything old and valuable that came through the area. Ray didn't trust him entirely, but the man had an extensive knowledge of artifacts, and that's what Ray needed right now. Knowledge. He grabbed the bag with the mask inside and walked up to the door, which creaked open as he pushed it. Inside, the small shop was dark and smelled of dust and old wood. Shelves were lined with glass cases filled with various items, old coins, ancient tools, and strange statues. At the back of the shop, Harold was hunched over a desk, sorting through papers. He didn't look up as Ray approached, so Ray cleared his throat. "Harold," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I need your help." Harold raised his head slowly, his graying hair falling over his forehead. He didn't speak immediately, but studied Ray's face for a moment, noting the tension in his posture. It wasn't often that Ray came in here, and when he did, it was usually for something specific. "What's got you looking so serious, Walker?" Harold asked, leaning back in his chair. Ray reached into the bag and pulled out the mask, placing it gently on the counter between them. Harold's eyes narrowed as he inspected it. His fingers hovered above it, but he didn't touch it. His face was unreadable, but Ray could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes. "This came from the water," Ray said. "I found it floating while I was fishing. It doesn't feel right, Harold. I don't know what it is, but I need to know what it is." Harold sat still for a long moment, his gaze never leaving the mask. The silence between them was thick, charged with something neither man wanted to acknowledge. "I've seen that symbol before," Harold finally said, his voice low, "but I never thought I'd see it in person." He sighed, looking away from the mask as if it had suddenly become something more than just an object. "You're going to want to hear this story. You might not like it, but you need to hear it." Ray's heart pounded in his chest as he leaned forward. "What are you talking about? What's the story?" Harold hesitated again before speaking, his voice lowering even more. "Years ago, there were rumors about an ancient cult that used to inhabit this region, somewhere out beyond the waters, near the islands to the north. It was said that they worshipped something that came from the deep, something older than the ocean itself. They created masks like this, ceremonial items that were said to contain, I don't know how to explain it, a power." Ray's mind raced. "A power?" Harold nodded slowly. "I don't know if I believe it myself, but people say that whoever wears these masks gains some kind of connection to whatever is beneath the sea, some kind of force that controls the tides, the currents, and even the creatures of the deep." Ray couldn't believe what he was hearing. "That's insane." "I told you," Harold said. "You weren't going to like it. But I've studied a lot of these old stories over the years, and that symbol," he pointed to the intricate design on the mask, "it's tied to the cult. They said the masks weren't just for ceremonies. They were a key to something much darker." Ray felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What does that mean? What kind of key?" Harold ran a hand through his hair. "That's the part I don't know, but I do know one thing. People who found these masks, bad things happened to them. It's why the cult disappeared, why no one talks about them anymore. And it's why, when they found the last of these masks, they were sealed away, hidden." Ray's fingers tightened around the edges of the mask, his heart pounding. He couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Something was already happening. But what? Harold looked him dead in the eye. "You're in danger, Walker. I don't know how, but I can feel it. This mask, it's not just a relic. You should never have touched it." Ray didn't say anything. He stood up abruptly, feeling the weight of Harold's words sink into his chest. He didn't want to believe it. He couldn't, but the feeling in the pit of his stomach was undeniable. Whatever this was, it was real, and he had unwittingly opened the door to something far bigger than he could comprehend. As Ray left Harold's shop, the air outside felt colder, heavier, The sky had darkened, and a storm was beginning to roll in from the sea. The waves, which had once seemed like a comforting constant, now looked menacing. A knot of fear twisted in Ray's stomach. What was this mask? What did it want? And why had he found it? His thoughts were interrupted by a voice calling his name. He turned, startled to see Tom, the local historian and one of the few people he trusted, approaching him. "Ray, you okay?" Tom asked, his face showing concern. "I don't know," Ray replied, his voice low. "You need to see this." Tom raised an eyebrow as Ray handed him the bag. "What is it?" Ray didn't answer. He just watched as Tom pulled the mask from the bag, his face becoming pale as he saw the symbol. "You found this?" Tom asked, his voice cracking slightly. This is bad. Real bad." Ray's heart raced. What the hell is going on? Tom looked around nervously, his eyes darting to the sea. "This mask. It's not just a piece of history. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." The storm in the distance rumbled louder. "Listen, Ray," Tom said, his voice urgent. "You need to get rid of it. Burn it, throw it back in the sea, do whatever you can. Trust me, you don't want to be anywhere near this." Ray didn't speak. Instead, he just nodded and turned away, the storm beginning to close in around him, much like the darkness that seemed to be following him now. Do you think Ray should have kept the mask, or is it already too late for him? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more mysterious stories like this one. And hey, where are you watching from? We'd love to know. Ray didn't want to acknowledge the gnawing feeling in his gut, the heavy weight that had settled into his chest like a lead anchor. As he walked away from Tom, the storm began to pick up speed, the wind gusting in unpredictable bursts. The ocean, which had always seemed like a familiar companion to Ray, now felt alien, threatening. The water appeared darker than usual, the waves crashing in violent rhythmic succession, as if echoing the turmoil inside him. He didn't know what had come over him. The mask had been nothing more than an odd discovery at first, a strange object that might have been an old artifact, abandoned by time or forgotten by whoever had once owned it. But now, it was something else. It was a catalyst. The air around him seemed charged, every gust of wind feeling sharper, colder. The mask's symbol, with its spiraling lines, haunted his thoughts, threatening to consume him. Every time he closed his eyes, the image was there, taunting him, whispering its mystery. Ray made his way back to his boat, his thoughts spinning in tight circles. He needed to get away, to clear his head, but he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening, it was already too late for that. Too late for him to turn back. The mask, the symbol, the warnings from Harold and Tom, it was all connected. He was caught in something he didn't fully understand, something far bigger than he was. But what could he do? Throw it back into the sea? But Harold said that was dangerous, and Tom had been clear, get rid of it. But Ray couldn't do that. Not yet. He couldn't simply let go of something so strange, so ominous, without knowing more. He needed answers. The storm raged overhead, the waves growing higher, and the sky darkened as though the world itself was closing in on him. Ray stepped onto the deck of his boat, untying the ropes and starting the engine, his mind set on one thing: get out there, get back to the spot where he'd found the mask. Something about it, some strange pull, was urging him to return. But as the boat cut through the choppy water, the sky continued to darken. The air was thick with the promise of something more, something powerful, something ancient. It wasn't just the storm, it was something in the water, something waiting. Ray felt it in his bones. As he navigated the boat further from the shore, the clouds above him seemed to close in tighter, casting the sea in a deep, foreboding gray. The rain began to fall in sheets, slashing across his face and blurring his vision. But he didn't stop. He had to reach the point where he'd found the mask, had to understand what was calling to him from beneath the waves. As he got closer, something unusual caught his eye, a shadow beneath the water moving against the current. It was too large to be a school of fish. Ray's pulse quickened. What in the world was that? He steered the boat toward the spot where the shadow had appeared, his hand shaking slightly on the wheel. The waves were growing stronger, crashing against the hull with a force that made the boat lurch uncomfortably. The sea seemed to be pushing him, urging him to come closer to whatever was hiding just beneath its surface. And then, just as he was about to give in to the compulsion to dive into the water, a scream broke the air. Ray's heart leapt into his throat as the sound echoed through the storm. The scream wasn't human. It was deep, guttural, and almost inhuman. It came from the water itself. He froze, his eyes wide with horror, as the scream cut through the thick air again, louder this time. Something terrible was coming. He could barely comprehend what was happening. His body reacted before his mind could process it, and without thinking, he reached for the mask. He had to. He had to understand what was happening. The scream had come from beneath the water, but the mask, it had to be connected. He couldn't explain it, but he felt a terrifying certainty that the mask was the key to whatever was emerging from the deep. Ray fumbled with the mask, his hands slick with sweat in the rain, struggling to make sense of it. The symbol, now so familiar, seemed to twist in the dim light, almost as though it was shifting before his eyes. The pressure in the air seemed to build, as if the storm was a mere reflection of something much darker, much more powerful, rising from the ocean itself. A new sound joined the scream, the sound of something heavy dragging against the sea floor, something large and fast. Ray's eyes snapped to the water, and that was when he saw it, an enormous shape moving toward him, something massive, with scales that shimmered like liquid silver, its eyes glowing an unnatural bright yellow. It was an ancient creature, something that hadn't been seen by human eyes in centuries, if ever. The stories about the cult, about the masks, suddenly made sense in the most horrifying way. Ray's heart pounded in his chest as the creature surged closer. He could see it now, its long serpentine body coiling beneath the waves. Its jaws opened wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth that gleamed in the low light. The scream, the creature's scream, filled the air again, louder and more anguished. It was calling to him, calling for the mask. With a sudden burst of panic, Ray threw the mask into the water, hoping to rid himself of the dark energy that had settled into his bones. But as soon as it touched the sea, the creature's movement stopped. The waves stilled. The storm began to subside. For a moment, everything was quiet, too quiet. Ray stood frozen, his mind racing, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The boat drifted in the calm after the storm, and for a moment he wondered if he had imagined it all. But then, as the fog began to lift, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The mask. It was floating just beneath the surface, no longer drifting aimlessly, but moving toward him as if it had a will of its own. The water around it seemed to churn, as though the mask was pulling the very sea in its wake. Ray's hands shook as he turned the boat's engine back on, desperate to get away from the monstrous shape below, from the ancient force that he now knew had been waiting for centuries. He couldn't stay here. Whatever this was, whatever this mask represented, was far beyond his understanding. It wasn't just a piece of history or a relic from an ancient cult. It was a key to something far darker. As Ray sped away from the spot, the boat tearing through the water at full speed, he glanced over his shoulder. The mask was still there, bobbing on the surface like an unholy beacon, calling to him. Was it too late to run? Or was this just the beginning of something much worse? Would you have thrown the mask back into the ocean, or would you have tried to keep it? What do you think is happening with the creature and the mask? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more mysterious stories. Also, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Let us know in the comments. Ray didn't dare look back. His grip on the wheel tightened as the boat cut through the water, the engine roaring in his ears, the salty air slapping against his face. His heart still pounded in his chest, every beat a drum of fear, and yet a part of him couldn't escape the pull of the mask. He didn't understand it. He didn't want to understand it. But as much as he tried to flee, he knew it wasn't done with him. The storm had died down, but the feeling of dread clung to him like a shadow, pressing against him, whispering to him. He couldn't shake the image of the creature, its massive serpentine body, its glowing yellow eyes, the way it seemed to rise out of the very depths of the sea as though summoned. He had only seen it for a brief moment, but that moment was burned into his mind. The creature had called to him, and the mask had reacted. The two were connected in a way that felt far too real, far too ancient. Ray's thoughts spiraled into a labyrinth of uncertainty. Could the mask have been some kind of lure, drawing him in? Or had he unknowingly released something from the ocean's deepest corners, something that was never meant to surface? And then there was the storm itself, the suddenness of its arrival, the way it seemed to mimic his growing sense of panic. It wasn't natural. The storm had been too abrupt, too coordinated. It felt like it had been summoned, like the sea itself had been compelled to rise and rage against him. He sped toward the shore, his mind struggling to process the chaos that had unfolded in the past few hours. But just as the shore came into view, his thoughts were interrupted by a sound, a soft, almost imperceptible tapping. At first, he thought it was nothing more than the rain against the hull, but as it grew louder, his eyes darted around, searching for the source. His gaze landed on the water beside him, and his stomach dropped. The mask. It was floating next to the boat, now moving at an unnatural pace. The water around it was swirling, as if something beneath the surface was causing it to spin in tight, deliberate circles. Ray's heart skipped a beat. The mask was following him. The creature, too, was surely close. He could almost feel its presence in the water beneath him. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped his chest as he shoved the throttle forward, urging the boat to go faster. But the more he tried to outrun it, the faster the mask seemed to move, the water churning in its wake. Ray could see it now. Its surface was alive, shimmering with an otherworldly light. It wasn't the reflection of the moon or the rain. It was as if the mask itself was glowing, pulsing with some hidden energy. What did it want with him? Was it merely an object, a relic with a story to tell, or something far darker? Was he cursed for finding it, or had he merely stumbled upon something that had been waiting for centuries to be uncovered? Suddenly, a wave crashed against the side of the boat, sending Ray tumbling to the deck. His head hit the metal with a sickening thud, and for a moment the world spun around him. He groaned, trying to shake off the dizziness, but as he struggled to get back to his feet, a cold hand of dread curled around his throat. The mask was on the boat. It had appeared at the bow of the boat somehow, silently, as though it had materialized out of the mist. Ray could see it clearly now. Its surface was slick, wet with seawater, and the symbol was more distinct than ever, almost glowing with a malevolent energy. His breath hitched as his mind raced. What was it doing here? Had it been drawn to him, or was something worse at play? He reached out instinctively, his hand shaking as he hovered above the mask. But before his fingers could make contact, he heard a voice, a whisper, faint but unmistakable, coming from the mask. "Take it." Ray froze, his blood running cold. It wasn't in his head. It wasn't a figment of his imagination. It was as if the mask itself had spoken, the words sinking into his thoughts with a strange urgency. It was calling to him, tempting him. Take it. His heart raced, and for a moment, he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The voice was so compelling, so hypnotic. The mask, he realized, wasn't just an object. It was alive with intent. It wanted him to take it back. Ray's hand hovered over the mask, but just as he was about to grab it, a sudden crack of thunder rumbled through the sky. The boat lurched violently, throwing him off balance again. He looked up to see that the water had changed, the sea now churning and swirling as though it was alive, as though the very ocean itself was responding to the mask's call. The voice in his mind was louder now, insistent, demanding. Take it. Claim it. Ray stumbled to his feet, desperately trying to steady himself, his mind a blur of conflicting thoughts. The storm was intensifying again, and the waves were growing higher, crashing with an unnatural force. It was as if the sea had become a living creature, angry and vengeful. The very water beneath him seemed to shift, twisting and writhing like something dark was trying to break free. Ray's eyes darted to the horizon. The shore was still miles away. The boat was no longer in control, tossed by the furious waves. And the mask, it seemed to glow brighter, as if it had absorbed the very fury of the storm. What was happening? Was the sea really angry because of the mask? Was the storm a direct result of his actions? Or was this just the beginning of something far worse? For the first time, Ray's survival instinct kicked in. He couldn't stay here. He couldn't keep fighting the storm, fighting the pull of the mask. But the fear of what might happen if he let go of the mask, or worse, what would happen if he didn't, kept him rooted in place. The water around the boat began to bubble. A low, rumbling sound emanated from the depths, vibrating through the hull of the boat. Ray's heart was racing. His breath came in shallow gasps. What was that sound? It was like something huge, something ancient, was stirring beneath the surface. Before he could react, a sudden violent wave hit the boat, throwing him into the water. The impact was like a punch to the chest, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. He flailed, trying to find his bearings, but the water was cold and thick, and he felt the weight of the ocean pulling him down, dragging him under. Panic surged through him, but even as he struggled to stay afloat, His eyes locked onto the mask. It was still there, floating above the waves, calling to him. Ray's limbs burned as he fought to swim toward it, the mask now a dark silhouette against the chaotic sea. He reached out, his hand grazing the edge of it, but the moment his fingers touched its surface, something electrifying shot through him. It was like a jolt of energy, a surge of power that made his whole body seize up. The waves around him stopped. The storm stilled. For a brief, fleeting moment, there was nothing but silence. And then, it appeared. From beneath the water, rising slowly as though it had been waiting, the creature emerged again. Its massive, serpent-like form breached the surface, its scales glistening like dark metal. Its eyes locked onto Ray, and the air around him seemed to freeze. The world stood still, and Ray's heart pounded so loudly in his ears it felt as though it would burst. "Take it," the voice whispered again. But this time, the voice didn't come from the mask. It came from the creature, from the very depths of the ocean. Ray's mind raced. He realized too late that he had made a terrible mistake. He had taken the mask. He had claimed it, and now there was no going back. What had he unleashed? And what would happen if he couldn't stop it? Do you think Ray made a mistake by keeping the mask? What do you think the creature wants from him? And how far will the storm go? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to uncover more stories like this one. We'd also love to know, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Ray could barely keep his head above water. The waves continued to surge, though now they felt different, more deliberate, as if the ocean itself was responding to the creature's presence. The sea around him was no longer chaotic. It was alive, an extension of something far older than human comprehension, something ancient and terrifying. He clutched the mask in his hand, its surface burning cold, and yet it was pulsing, almost as though it were alive. Every time his fingers tightened around it, the strange energy coursing through him intensified. He felt the weight of its power, but with it came a growing fear, the unmistakable feeling that the mask was no longer just a physical object. It was a conduit. It had called to the creature from the depths, and it was now tethered to Ray in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. The creature, its monstrous form rising from the water like some dark god, turned its glowing yellow eyes toward Ray. It was more than just a beast. It was something otherworldly. Its massive body coiled beneath the surface, the sea around it writhing as though it had become its domain. The storm had stilled, but an eerie, oppressive calm had replaced it. "You summoned me." The voice wasn't just in his head this time. It came from the creature's gaping maw, a voice so deep it reverberated through Ray's bones. Ray's heart raced. He wanted to scream, to flee, but he knew there was nowhere to run. The ocean, the mask, the creature, it had all been set into motion, and now it was clear that there was no escape. With an almost painful slowness, the creature began to rise higher, its enormous head hovering just above the water. Its eyes bore into Ray, as if reading his soul, studying him. The weight of its gaze was suffocating, and for a moment, Ray was paralyzed with fear. "The mask is mine," the creature's voice rumbled, shaking Ray to his core. "You will return it." But Ray couldn't. The pull of the mask was too strong. It wasn't just a relic anymore. It was part of him, part of what had awakened beneath the waves. He couldn't let it go. He didn't even want to. With trembling hands, Ray held the mask aloft, feeling the strange current of energy grow stronger. The creature's eyes flickered with an ancient rage, and Ray could see the ocean begin to churn again, the dark waters swirling around him. "No!" the creature roared, its voice shaking the very air. Ray could feel the sea beneath him rising, the waters pulling in every direction. The waves surged higher, threatening to engulf him, but he was locked in place, unable to move, as if the mask had become the anchor, the key to an ancient power. The creature let out a deafening cry, and with it, the sea seemed to convulse violently, as though the ocean was fighting against its own restraints. Ray's vision blurred, the force of the waves almost overwhelming him. And then, in a final moment of clarity, the creature's eyes locked onto him with such intensity that it felt like time had stopped. "The mask belongs to the deep. You have chosen, and now you will serve." The sea exploded around him, and the force of the impact sent Ray spiraling into the darkness of the water. His last thought, as he sank beneath the waves, was that the ocean, The storm and the creature had all been waiting for him, for the moment he would take the mask and unleash whatever it was that had been sealed away for centuries. The mask had chosen him. And in that final moment, Ray realized that his life, his very existence, was now part of something far bigger, far more terrifying than anything he had ever imagined. Would you dare to take the mask? What do you think happened to Ray? Was it his fate? Or was he just an unwitting pawn in something far older and more dangerous than he could ever understand? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you want to hear more stories like this, be sure to hit that like button, comment your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of our mysterious tales. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.